Richard Iraong, who later became a celebrated aviator, spent his formative years in the serene landscape of Poplar, Wisconsin. His birthplace, where he arrived on September 24, 1920, was characterized by the distinct aroma of pine forests intermingling with expansive farmlands stretching endlessly across the horizon. As the eldest among 9 siblings in a Swedish-American household, Dick, as he was affectionately known, was raised in an environment that deeply valued diligence and unwavering effort. His father, Carl, dedicated his life to cultivating the land, and young Dick's childhood mirrored that of many farm boys, a continuous cycle of pre-dawn chores, attending school, and then resuming agricultural duties until dusk. There was nothing in his early experiences that would suggest a future as a formidable warrior. He was a reserved and methodical individual, more inclined to meticulously repair an engine than to engage in self-promotion or casual conversation. Yet a subtle fascination began to take root whenever he directed his gaze skyward. Aircraft sightings were a rarity over rural Wisconsin during the 1930s, and the appearance of one would invariably cause Dick to pause his activities, captivated, until the flying machine disappeared from view. By 1938, having successfully completed his high school education, he enrolled at Superior State Teachers College. His parents harbored expectations of him pursuing a career in teaching, a respectable profession promising stability. However, Dick harbored different aspirations. He had encountered narratives about the Army Air Corps, stories of individuals who soared through the skies rather than traversing the ground, engaging in combat across 3 dimensions instead of 2. In 1941, amidst the escalating conflict in Europe and rising tensions with Japan, he made a pivotal decision that would irrevocably alter the course of his life. He enlisted in the Army Air Corps Aviation Cadet Program. His parents struggled to comprehend why a farm boy who had never before experienced flight would aspire to pilot an aircraft. Nevertheless, Dick had discovered his true calling, even if he couldn't articulate its full meaning at that juncture. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. The devastating assault on Pearl Harbor occurred on December 7, 1941, while Bong was still undergoing his rigorous training regimen. Abruptly, aviation cadets were no longer merely acquiring a specialized skill, they were being prepared for the grim realities of warfare. The entire training program was dramatically accelerated, transforming what had initially been a career choice into an intensive survival course. Dick progressed through his primary training in California, followed by advanced instruction in Arizona. Instructors swiftly recognized an extraordinary quality in him. He was not one for ostentatious displays or reckless showmanship. Yet his spatial awareness was uncannily precise, almost preternatural. He possessed the remarkable ability to track multiple aircraft during a simulated dogfight scenario, while simultaneously maintaining impeccable energy management. One instructor, in a written evaluation, noted his natural ability exceptional. Gunnery scores highest in class, lacks aggression. This final observation would, in time, prove remarkably ironic. Dick's approach was not aggressive in the conventional sense. He refrained from provocative remarks or seeking direct confrontation. Instead, he possessed a far more valuable trait: unwavering patience. While many of his fellow cadets eagerly sought to engage in every skirmish, Dick meticulously analyzed angles, distances, and closure rates. He would patiently bide his time, waiting for the optimal firing solution, rather than squandering precious ammunition on low-probability deflection shots. This disciplined approach was deeply rooted in his upbringing. On a farm, one does not idly waste bullets during a hunt. Every shot must be precise and effective, as a second opportunity might not present itself. He earned his coveted wings and commission as a second lieutenant on January 9, 1942. At the tender age of 21, Dick Bong had officially become a fighter pilot, though he had yet to experience the crucible of combat or fire his weapons at an adversary. The Army Air Corps initially assigned him to Hamilton Field in California as an instructor, a role he fulfilled for several months, imparting to other aspiring pilots the fundamental skills he had so thoroughly mastered. It was a secure and vital assignment, but it was not the ultimate purpose for which he had enlisted. By the middle of 1942, the Pacific Theater of Operations was in dire need of experienced pilots. Japanese forces were achieving significant victories, systematically pushing American forces back from island to island. The rate at which pilots were being lost far outpaced the rate at which they could be replaced. Dick persistently requested combat duty. Finally, in September 1942, his orders arrived. He was assigned to the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific and would be flying an aircraft he had only heard whispered about, the Lockheed P-38 Lightning. The P-38 Lightning was an aviation marvel, unlike any other aircraft then gracing the skies. Most fighter planes were equipped with a single engine. The Lightning, however, boasted two, strategically mounted on distinctive twin booms that extended rearward to a characteristic twin-tail assembly. The cockpit was ingeniously situated within a central nacelle, positioned between these booms, affording the pilot an unparalleled, unobstructed panoramic view that single-engine fighters simply could not rival. Lockheed had originally conceived and designed this aircraft in 1937 as a high-altitude interceptor, and by 1942 it had earned its reputation as the swiftest fighter in the American arsenal. However, its impressive speed came with inherent complexities. The twin Allison V-1710 engines demanded impeccable synchronization. The failure of one engine necessitated immediate and precise compensation with rudder trim, lest the asymmetric thrust induce a dangerous spin. Furthermore, the turbo superchargers, crucial for the Lightning's exceptional high-altitude performance, were known to be temperamental, prone to malfunctions that could swiftly transform a combat mission into an urgent, emergency landing scenario. When Bong first settled into the cockpit of a P-38 at Hamilton Field, he found the interior surprisingly spacious compared to the single-engine trainers he was accustomed to. The control yoke, rather than a traditional stick, was positioned between his legs, lending the experience a sensation more akin to piloting a bomber than a fighter. A formidable array of weaponry, 4 50-caliber machine guns, and a single 20mm cannon, was meticulously clustered in the aircraft's nose, all firing directly forward through the propeller arc without the need for synchronization gear. This configuration translated into devastatingly concentrated firepower. While other fighters typically had guns mounted in their wings, resulting in a dispersed shot pattern, the P-38's nose-mounted armaments converged at a single, lethal point. Any target caught within this convergent zone would be utterly torn apart. Yet, the Lightning carried a certain reputation, and not all of it was favorable. Pilots frequently described it as heavy and claimed it lacked the maneuverability to outturn German Bf-109s or Japanese Zeros. Its controls were known to stiffen significantly at high speeds, making recovery from dives a perilous undertaking. In the European theater, P-38s were reportedly struggling against Luftwaffe fighters that could outturn and outclimb them at medium altitudes. Consequently, some pilots actively sought transfers to P-51 Mustangs or P-47 Thunderbolts, lamenting that the Lightning was a widowmaker. Dick absorbed all these prevalent complaints during his checkout training, but he perceived the aircraft through a different lens. While acknowledging the P-38's substantial weight, it exceeded 17,500 pounds when fully loaded, he recognized that this mass conferred distinct advantages. The aircraft was inherently stable, serving as an exceptionally steady gun platform that remained unperturbed by turbulence. The presence of twin engines offered crucial redundancy. The loss of one engine still allowed for a safe return to base. And as for its firepower, nothing else in the Pacific theater could deliver such a potent, concentrated burst of destruction in a single volley. I am from your country region, and I find the video topic of Richard Erong's journey into becoming a fighter pilot incredibly inspiring. It's a powerful testament to how a seemingly ordinary upbringing can lead to extraordinary achievements through dedication and a unique perception of one's tools and environment. A single, decisive burst. Dick dedicated weeks to thoroughly mastering the distinctive operational characteristics of the Lightning. The twin engines, a signature feature of the P-38, demanded a delicate touch, particularly during the critical phase of takeoff. An overly aggressive application of power could unleash a powerful torque effect, violently veering the aircraft from the designated runway path. Unlike the more forgiving controls of a typical training aircraft, the P-38 in the heat of battle prohibited abrupt, forceful movements of the control stick. Instead, it necessitated a refined approach, requiring fluid, harmonized inputs from the pilot. However, once a pilot truly grasped its unique operational cadence, the aircraft revealed itself as an exceptionally responsive and elegant machine. Dick meticulously refined his aerial marksmanship, calibrating his gunnery convergence zone to an optimal distance of 300 yards. This specific setting allowed for the delivery of exceptionally destructive strikes against enemy aircraft, while simultaneously ensuring a safe separation to prevent damage from the explosive fragments of disintegrating targets. He delved deeply into understanding the Lightning's remarkable capacity for energy retention. When executing a dive, the P-38 stood out as one of the most expeditious aircraft ever conceived. This immense velocity was not merely a raw attribute, it represented a strategic asset, capable of being transmuted into superior altitude, advantageous positioning, and ultimately the decisive edge required to prevail in intense aerial engagements. In the waning days of September 1942, the military authorities dispatched him to San Francisco, California, a pivotal embarkation point. There, he boarded a naval transport vessel, its destination set across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean towards the distant shores of Australia. The arduous sea journey spanned several weeks, characterized by the ship's evasive, serpentine course designed to circumvent the lurking menace of Japanese submarines. Dick judiciously utilized this protracted transit period to internalize the intricate P-38 emergency protocols, meticulously rehearse potential combat situations in his mind, and fortify his psychological readiness for the impending realities of war. He had absorbed numerous accounts from aviators who had recently completed their tours in the Pacific theater. These first-hand narratives starkly contradicted the caricatured portrayal of the Japanese as inept, myopic adversaries, often depicted in wartime propaganda. On the contrary, these returning pilots attested to an enemy force that was highly seasoned, relentlessly aggressive, and whose formidable Zero fighters possessed an unparalleled maneuverability, capable of outturning any American aircraft then in service. The sole tactical superiorities available to American pilots, they emphasized, lay in their aircraft's formidable firepower, their exceptional dive speed, and the critical importance of coordinated teamwork. Dick understood with profound clarity that he would require the masterful application of all three elements to survive and succeed. Upon his arrival in Brisbane, Australia, during the initial days of November 1942, he received his official assignment to the distinguished 9th Fighter Squadron, a component of the 49th Fighter Group, operating under the umbrella of the 5th Air Force. This particular unit maintained its primary operational base in Port Moresby, New Guinea, a location notoriously described as a malarial inferno brutally carved out of the dense, oppressive jungle terrain along the island southern coastline. The formidable Japanese forces maintained control over the northern coast, with the rugged and imposing Owen Stanley Mountains serving as a natural, formidable barrier, delineating the two opposing armies. With relentless predictability, Japanese bomber formations launched daily assaults against Allied installations, their missions invariably protected by vigilant Zero escorts. In equally relentless fashion, American fighter squadrons launched into the skies each day, scrambling to intercept these aerial incursions. This arduous, perilous environment now constituted Dick Bong's new operational theater, and his rigorous, real-world instruction in the brutal realities of aerial warfare was poised to commence within what could only be described as the planet, his most merciless and unforgiving educational institution. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Port Moresby, during November of 1942, presented an utterly brutal tableau, a veritable hellscape characterized by oppressive, unrelenting humidity. The rudimentary airfield consisted of a makeshift runway fashioned from perforated steel planking, precariously laid atop an intractable mire of mud that perpetually refused to yield to dryness. Mosquitoes, a pervasive and malevolent presence, congregated in such dense, suffocating swarms that merely breathing became an act of involuntary ingestion. Pilots endured their existence within canvas tents, which, under the relentless tropical sun, transformed into stifling ovens by day, yet offered no substantive refuge from the torrential downpours that descended with unnerving punctuality each afternoon. The insidious triumvirate of dysentery, malaria, and dengue fever proved to be a more prolific cause of hospitalization among the troops than the actual projectiles discharged by Japanese weaponry. The 49th Fighter Group, having been embroiled in continuous combat operations since April, bore the unmistakable scars of prolonged engagement. Their dedicated mechanics toiled ceaselessly on P-38s, many bearing the grievous wounds of battle, improvising repairs with whatever spare components they could painstakingly salvage or fabricate. The aviators themselves, weathered and hardened by the ceaseless strain, appeared to have aged a decade beyond the chronological data recorded in their official service files. Dick, a fresh-faced youth from the pastoral landscapes of Wisconsin, presented himself to Major Paul Wartsmith, the group commander. Wartsmith, observing the newcomer's youthful demeanor, swiftly made the pragmatic decision to assign him the role of wingman, pairing him with seasoned, battle-hardened pilots. It was a well-understood grim truth that aspiring to heroism on one's inaugural mission in New Guinea was a sure path to an early demise. His baptism of fire, Dick's inaugural combat sortie, occurred on the 27th of December 1942. Aerial reconnaissance had relayed critical intelligence, indicating the imminent approach of Japanese bomber formations originating from Rabaul, their objective being the Allied shipping vessels anchored within the harbor. In swift response, the 9th Fighter Squadron launched a flight of 16 P-38s, their powerful engines roaring as they ascended rapidly, striving to gain altitude and intercept the incoming aerial menace. Dick, occupying the crucial position of wingman, understood his responsibilities were straightforward yet vital. Maintain unwavering proximity to his flight leader, vigilantly guard his leader's rear, and meticulously avoid any imprudent actions. At a formidable altitude of 18,000 feet, his gaze fixed upon the approaching enemy. A distinct formation of twin-engine bombers, most likely the Mitsubishi G4Ms, colloquially identified by American airmen as Betties, their passage meticulously protected by nimble Zero-fighter escorts, weaving protectively above. A palpable tension seized him, his hands involuntarily clenching around the control yoke. Every primal instinct urged him to close the distance and unleash his ordnance. Yet the stringent adherence to aerial discipline effectively restrained his impulse. His designated flight leader, a veteran of previous engagements, skillfully maneuvered their section into an advantageous position for an assault. They initiated a steep dive, strategically descending from the blinding glare of the sun, a classic tactical maneuver designed to disorient and complicate any defensive counteractions from the accompanying Zero fighters. At that precise moment, the orderly progression of events dissolved into a maelstrom of simultaneous action. His flight leader initiated the engagement, unleashing a torrent of fire upon a Betty bomber. The incandescent trails of his tracer rounds meticulously tracking into the bomber's vulnerable wing route. Dick, adhering to his role, positioned himself to follow suit, meticulously aligning his gun sight's aiming reticle, or pipper, onto an adjacent enemy bomber. He actuated the trigger. The P-38 responded with a violent shudder, a testament to the simultaneous discharge of its formidable armament, 4 50-caliber machine guns, and its powerful cannon. His inaugural combat burst, a fleeting moment of intense aggression, endured for perhaps a mere 2 seconds. He distinctly observed impacts scarring the Betty's fuselage. Yet the rapidity of the unfolding events prevented him from accurately assessing the extent of the damage inflicted before a Japanese Zero fighter streaked past his canopy, its proximity so immediate that the pilot's helmet was momentarily visible. The hitherto disciplined radio channels erupted into a cacophony of urgent, overlapping voices, broadcasting frantic warnings. "Brake right! 2 zeros high! Watch your 6." Dick executed an aggressive pull, the immense G-forces momentarily crushing his chest as he lost visual contact with his flight leader amidst the swirling pandemonium. This stark reality bore no resemblance to the controlled environments of training exercises. where every participant adhered to a predetermined sequence of actions. Here, in the brutal crucible of genuine combat, any semblance of a script was instantly incinerated the very instant contact with the adversary was established. He found himself isolated at an altitude of 15,000 feet, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The rigorous radio discipline he had diligently acquired during his training dissolved completely, replaced by a chaotic torrent of urgent calls from pilots reporting threats, relaying their positions, and desperately requesting assistance. Dick abruptly altered his trajectory, casting about anxiously for any sign of his squadron mates. His gaze then fixed upon a P-38, ominously trailing plumes of smoke, with two tenacious Zeros clamped firmly to its tail. The beleaguered fighter was visibly absorbing punishing blows, fragments of its left boom tearing away into the atmosphere. Without a moment's hesitation, driven by pure instinct, Dick initiated a steep dive. The airspeed indicator needle rapidly ascended, 320, then 340, then 360 miles per hour. The P-38, a marvel of engineering, seemed eager to accelerate further, yet the aerodynamic pressures rendered the control surfaces increasingly heavy and resistant. He aligned his sights on the trailing Zero, still a considerable 600 yards distant, a range generally considered too great for truly effective engagement. Nevertheless, he squeezed the trigger. Long, incandescent streams of tracer rounds gracefully arced towards the enemy fighter. The Zero's pilot, keenly aware of the sudden threat, immediately disengaged from his attack and rapidly ascended away. Dick, exercising crucial tactical restraint, chose not to pursue. He understood implicitly that attempting to chase Zeros into their favored climbing turns was a virtual death sentence. The damaged P-38, its integrity compromised, struggled onward, making its slow, arduous way back towards base. Dick would forever remain unaware of the identity of the pilot he had, perhaps, saved. The squadron eventually returned to the desolate airfield at Port Moresby. A grim accounting revealing that only 13 of the original 16 aircraft had successfully completed the mission. A palpable void marked the absence of 3 aviators. One pilot's fate was tragically confirmed. His P-38 had detonated following a direct assault from a Zero, leaving no doubt as to his demise. The other 2 remained unaccounted for, their whereabouts a chilling mystery. Speculation, grim and unsettling, suggested various possibilities. Perhaps their aircraft had succumbed to the dense, unforgiving embrace of the jungle below. Alternatively, they might have managed to ditch their planes in the surrounding waters, holding a slim hope of being located and recovered by rescue vessels. The unspoken, yet universally acknowledged probability, however, was that such a fortunate outcome was exceedingly unlikely. Following the formal debriefing, Dick retreated to the Spartan confines of his cot, his mind relentlessly replaying every single second of the aerial engagement. His internal critique was unsparing. He had discharged his weapons at 2 distinct targets, yet he harbored no conviction that he had inflicted any substantial damage upon either. The rigorous formation discipline he had painstakingly acquired had utterly disintegrated the instant the situation descended into disarray. Furthermore, he had, by his own harsh judgment, prematurely disengaged from an attack rather than resolutely pressing it home. By his own exacting criteria, he felt he had failed. Yet, a more profound truth resonated: he was alive. And crucially, the P-38 Lightning had performed with unerring fidelity to its design specifications. Its remarkable ability to dive at speeds that Zeros simply could not match had been unequivocally demonstrated, and its concentrated burst of formidable firepower had proven sufficient to deter an enemy pilot already deeply committed to securing a kill. In those fleeting yet intense 20 minutes of actual combat, he had absorbed more invaluable lessons than in countless months of simulated training exercises, an education forged in the crucible of life-or-death aerial struggle. Having completed months of rigorous training, the young pilot Dick embarked upon an intense period of active duty. Over the ensuing 6 weeks, he participated in an additional 23 aerial sorties. These missions primarily involved providing protection for bomber formations or conducting reconnaissance patrols, often without significant incident. A handful, however, escalated into intense, extended aerial combat encounters, particularly above the strategic waters of the Bismarck Sea and the scattered archipelagos of the Solomon Islands. His weaponry was discharged on 14 distinct occasions, and he reported striking 3 separate enemy aircraft during these engagements. Nevertheless, none of these potential victories were officially corroborated as outright destructions. The stringent regulations governing aerial victories were subsequently clarified by the group's intelligence officer, stipulating that definitive proof was mandatory. This proof required either indisputable gun camera film depicting the adversary's complete disintegration or an independent verification from a fellow pilot in another aircraft. Mere damage to the enemy plane or a probable destruction was insufficient for official credit. A pivotal shift occurred on January 8, 1943. On this significant date, Dick was engaged in a reconnaissance sweep mission above Leh, a formidable Japanese bastion situated on the northern coastline of New Guinea. During this operation, his flight unexpectedly encountered a contingent of Zero fighters, acting as escorts for Val dive bombers, which were in the process of returning from a bombing raid. The enemy aircraft were operating at a relatively low altitude, approximately 8,000 feet, affording the P-38s a distinct tactical advantage in elevation. Upon the command to bounce from Dick's flight leader, his section initiated a swift, plunging attack. In this critical moment, Dick's mind was unburdened by the theoretical protocols or the specific instructions imparted by his training cadre. 6 intense weeks of actual combat experience had fundamentally altered his neural pathways, enabling him to process complex tactical data with a speed surpassing conscious deliberation. He swiftly identified a Zero positioned at the periphery of the enemy formation, an aircraft seemingly unaware of the approaching P-38s, and instinctively computed the necessary deflection angle. His hands operated the flight controls with fluid precision, the rudder for alignment, a subtle application of stick pressure to maintain tracking, and precise throttle adjustments to manage the closing velocity. At a distance of 400 yards, he unleashed a torrent of fire, guiding his tracer rounds directly into the target. The Zero's right wing root instantly disintegrated in a violent explosion of shrapnel and debris. The stricken fighter violently pitched into a spin, plummeting earthward, leaving a vivid trail of smoke and flames. Dick, however, did not linger to observe its final impact. Another Zero was executing a sharp left turn, endeavoring to disengage, but the P-38's superior velocity propelled Dick through the enemy formation before the Japanese pilots could effectively respond. He executed a rapid ascent, converting his momentum into altitude, and then maneuvered for a subsequent attack run. On this pass, he located a Val dive bomber attempting to evade at an extremely low, wave-skimming altitude. The bomber's rear gunner unleashed defensive fire, sending luminous tracers arcing towards Dick's cockpit, yet the considerable distance and the light volume of fire rendered it ineffectual. Dick closed to 250 yards and delivered a decisive 3-second burst. The Val's left engine detonated spectacularly. The bomber then plunged nose first, impacting the water at a speed of 200 miles per hour. We sincerely invite you to stay with us and watch the conclusion of this compelling video. Your engagement, through a simple like and a subscription to our channel, would be immensely appreciated. Furthermore, we encourage you to share in the comments section where you are from and your thoughts on the subject matter presented in this video. This single mission resulted in the official confirmation of 2 enemy aircraft destroyed. Upon his return to Port Moresby, the evidentiary gun camera footage conclusively substantiated his claims, leading to a personal commendation from the group commander himself. Despite this notable achievement, Dick refrained from any form of celebration. Instead, his analytical mind meticulously replayed the entire engagement, frame by frame, identifying numerous tactical errors. He critiqued his premature firing on the Zero, which led to an unnecessary expenditure of precious ammunition. Similarly, he noted his extended presence within the dive bomber's defensive kill zone for almost 2 critical seconds, affording the rear gunner multiple opportunities to score a hit. His candid assessment concluded that fortuitous circumstances had played as significant a role in his survival as his inherent piloting prowess. A relentless drive for self-improvement fueled his conviction. He absolutely had to refine his capabilities. Merely 3 days subsequent to this initial success, he was afforded another opportunity to demonstrate his evolving combat acumen. An aerial sortie conducted over the expansive waters of the Huon Gulf swiftly devolved into a chaotic, swirling melee when a formation of 16 Zero fighters aggressively ambushed the P-38 contingent. Leveraging the P-38 Lightning's inherent advantage in dive speed, Dick skillfully managed to isolate a single Zero, drawing it away from the protective embrace of its wingmen. He then expertly utilized his aircraft's exceptional energy retention to regain altitude with remarkable swiftness, preempting any potential counter-response from the adversary. He subsequently engaged the now isolated Zero while it was executing a climbing turn, a notoriously vulnerable maneuver for any fighter aircraft. From a precise distance of 300 yards, directly astern, he unleashed his ordnance. The Japanese fighter was utterly obliterated. This marked his 3rd officially verified kill. A mere 7 days following this engagement, on January 24th, he achieved 2 additional Zero shootdowns during a singular encounter above Buna. This remarkable feat brought his tally to 5 confirmed victories within a span of just 13 days. With this achievement, Dick Bong officially attained the coveted status of an ace, and it was abundantly clear that his extraordinary aerial career was only just commencing. The distinguishing characteristic that set Dick apart from his equally proficient peers was his highly disciplined methodology towards aerial gunnery. While the majority of pilots frequently resorted to a strategy of spraying and praying, maintaining continuous trigger pressure in the hope of making contact, Dick employed a technique of brief, meticulously aimed bursts. He had meticulously computed that his aircraft's armaments held sufficient ammunition for approximately 15 seconds of uninterrupted firing. This duration, while seemingly ample, proved to be remarkably brief. During the frenetic pace of an aerial engagement, where targets materialized and vanished in mere fractions of a second. Dick's average burst duration was a mere 1.3 seconds, enabling him to execute a total of 12 distinct firing sequences before exhausting his supply. Every single shot was executed with painstaking precision, discharged only when the geometric alignment with the target was absolutely optimal. His unparalleled kill-to-ammunition expenditure ratio was truly exceptional. In stark contrast to other pilots who might expend upwards of 1,000 rounds to achieve a single confirmed kill, Dick's average was an astonishingly efficient 400 rounds per victory. Furthermore, he had achieved a consummate mastery of deflection shooting, which is the intricate skill of successfully striking a target that is traversing perpendicularly to one's own flight trajectory. A common failing among most pilots was their inability to accurately lead a moving target. They would instinctively direct their aim at the enemy's current position, rather than anticipating where the target would be by the time their projectiles intersected its path. Dick's formative years spent hunting ducks in the marshlands of Wisconsin had provided him with an invaluable foundation for this skill, as the principle of leading birds with a shotgun was fundamentally identical. He meticulously honed and refined this particular aptitude through a unique methodology he had personally devised. During routine training flights, he would diligently practice tracking fellow P-38s from his own squadron, consistently maintaining his gun sights aiming reticle ahead of them in a series of simulated deflection engagements. While his squadron comrades initially regarded this practice as somewhat eccentric, the rigorous training ultimately yielded immense dividends. In the crucible of actual combat, his brain effortlessly and instinctively computed the precise lead angles required. By February of 1943, Dick's confirmed aerial victories had reached a total of 7, earning him the profound admiration and respect of every single pilot within the esteemed 49th Fighter Group. However, he had also come to understand a more unsettling aspect of aerial combat, its inherently addictive nature. The heightened state of hyperawareness, the peculiar distortion where time appeared to decelerate during an intense engagement, and the raw, visceral satisfaction derived from executing a flawless shot. These experiences were unparalleled. No aspect of ordinary civilian existence could replicate such profound intensity. While many pilots succumb to combat fatigue after merely a few months, their nervous systems frayed by incessant pressure, Dick appeared remarkably impervious to such effects. He approached each successive mission with the identical, methodical concentration he had once applied to his agricultural duties. When his fellow pilots voiced grievances about the oppressive heat, the debilitating malaria, or the unpalatable rations, Dick's sole concern was inquiring about the schedule for the subsequent mission briefing. He had unequivocally discovered his innate calling, and his unwavering resolve was to ascend to the absolute pinnacle of that profession. The attainment of ace status brought with it a suite of privileges that Dick personally disdained, yet simultaneously it conferred upon him responsibilities that he embraced with utmost gravity. His burgeoning reputation attracted the attention of the press in March 1943, when the headquarters of the 5th Air Force actively sought compelling narratives of heroism to bolster morale among the civilian population back home. Journalists and photographers descended upon Port Moresby, eager to capture images of the unassuming farm boy who had transformed into a formidable aerial combatant. Dick found every moment of this media scrutiny utterly distasteful. He reluctantly posed beside his P-38, arms folded, his discomfort palpably evident, as reporters posed what he considered inane inquiries about the emotional experience of downing a Zero. How did it genuinely feel? To him, it felt akin to diligently performing his assigned duty. It felt like safeguarding the lives of his squadron comrades. It felt like an experience utterly ineffable, beyond the comprehension of anyone who had never occupied a cockpit at an altitude of 20,000 feet, with hostile fighters converging at a terrifying combined velocity of 600 miles per hour. The extraordinary velocity of 600 miles per hour was not merely a statistic, it was a testament to the prowess of the aircraft and the pilot. This remarkable speed, while impressive, had an unforeseen but profoundly beneficial consequence. General George Kenney, the distinguished commander of the 5th Air Force, personally intervened to ensure that Dick remained stationed in the theater of operations rather than being rotated back to his homeland. Typically, pilots would complete a designated combat tour before returning to the United States for a period of much-needed rest and subsequent instructor duties. However, General Kenney, recognizing Dick's exceptional skills, desired his most capable aviators to stay and impart their invaluable knowledge to the fresh influx of replacements, thereby enhancing their chances of survival in the unforgiving skies. Consequently, Dick was assigned supplementary responsibilities as a gunnery instructor. In the intervals between his perilous combat missions, he would ascend, with new recruits, meticulously demonstrating the intricate techniques that had preserved his own life. These vital lessons included crucial advice, such as refraining from engaging Japanese Zero fighters in a climb, instead utilizing superior dive speed to dictate the terms of engagement, firing economical short bursts of ammunition, and perpetually maintaining awareness of one's wingman's position. While some of the new pilots heeded his sage counsel, others, perhaps overconfident, believed their own instincts were superior. Dick, however, eventually ceased to concern himself with who listened, particularly after witnessing 3 overly ambitious hotshots tragically shot down within their inaugural week, a direct consequence of their disregard for his profound teachings. His 9th confirmed aerial victory materialized on the 3rd of March, 1943, during a mission that, by all accounts, should have resulted in his demise. He was diligently providing protective cover for a squadron of B-17 bombers engaged in an assault on Rabaul, when a contingent of 6 Zero fighters descended upon his section from a superior altitude. In a moment of sheer terror, Dick's wingman succumbed to panic and abruptly broke formation, leaving Dick isolated and outnumbered against multiple enemy combatants. The tactical predicament appeared utterly insurmountable. 6 adversaries against a solitary pilot, a significant altitude disadvantage, and a complete absence of support. Yet, Dick had internalized a critical lesson. Panic was a far more lethal threat than any enemy projectile. He maintained an unwavering composure, expertly leveraging the P-38's impressive roll rate to thwart the initial Zero's firing solution, then executed a swift dive to create a crucial separation. The Zeros, making a tactical error, pursued him. In a dive, no aircraft could hope to outmatch the formidable Lightning. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Dick skillfully recovered at an altitude of 5,000 feet, carrying sufficient momentum to execute a rapid zoom climb back to 12,000 feet. The pursuing Zeros were still in their descent when Dick ingeniously reversed his trajectory, catching one of the enemy aircraft in a climbing turn. He unleashed a precise 2-second burst of gunfire that catastrophically severed the Zero's tail section. The remaining 50 Zeros, likely low on vital fuel reserves, disengaged from the attack. Dick, his P-38 entirely unscathed, returned to base alone and submitted a detailed report that led to his wingman being grounded for a week. By April, his tally had risen to 12 kills, solidifying his formidable reputation. Other pilots meticulously studied his innovative tactics, and his gun camera footage became indispensable material for training films. The dedicated mechanics assigned to his P-38 took immense pride in maintaining its pristine operational condition. They affectionately christened the aircraft Marge, a tribute to Dick's girlfriend, residing back in Wisconsin. The name, along with 12 stylized Japanese flags representing his triumphs, was emblazoned on the plane's nose. Dick, though finding it somewhat whimsical, offered no objection, understanding the profound importance of morale, and if his ground crew required a mascot, his aircraft could certainly serve that purpose. What truly distinguished Dick from merely proficient pilots was his profound comprehension of energy management. In the intricate dance of a dogfight, every aircraft possesses a finite amount of energy, a complex interplay of speed and altitude. To squander this energy was to render oneself utterly defenseless. To preserve it was to command the very flow of the engagement. The P-38, unlike the agile Zero, was not designed as a turn fighter. Consequently, Dick never attempted to engage them in close-quarter turning contests. Instead, he masterfully employed the hit-and-run tactics, a strategy brilliantly pioneered by the legendary Flying Tigers in China. He would initiate a high-speed dive, deliver a decisive shot, extend rapidly away before the enemy could react, and then utilize his superior speed to regain altitude. This sequence was repeated with deadly efficiency. The Japanese, recognizing the distinctive twin-boom silhouette of the Lightning, referred to P-38 pilots as fork-tailed devils, and their most seasoned aviators learned to avoid direct confrontations whenever feasible. Dick also developed a unique approach he termed probability shooting. Most pilots meticulously aimed for the quintessential shot, patiently waiting until they were in the absolute ideal position before opening fire. Dick, however, recognized that in the chaotic and dynamic environment of an aerial dogfight, the perfect shot was an elusive phantom. Instead, he would take 70% shots, not flawless, but sufficiently accurate that his concentrated firepower could still inflict critical damage. While his accuracy was not substantially superior to that of his peers, he discharged 3 times as many rounds per engagement because he refused to be paralyzed by the pursuit of perfection. A greater volume of shots inevitably translated into a higher probability of hits, and more hits, in turn, led to a greater number of kills. By June of 1943, he had accumulated 18 confirmed aerial victories, solidifying his position as the leading American ace in the Pacific theater. However, it was not merely the numerical tally that propelled him forward. It was the intellectual challenge, the intricate geometric problem of precisely placing bullets into a rapidly moving target before that target could eliminate him or his wingman. Every engagement presented a distinct scenario, and every enemy pilot exhibited unique patterns and individual stratagems. Dick meticulously studied each one, cataloging lessons learned for the subsequent skirmish. Some Zeros, when under attack, would predictably break left. Others would attempt a desperate split S maneuver. The truly exceptional pilots would execute a scissor, attempting to force an overshoot. Dick honed his ability to anticipate these defensive responses, positioning himself with such foresight that any evasive action taken by the enemy inadvertently played directly into his next offensive maneuver. The summer of 1943 ushered in a new and critical phase in the Pacific War. The Allied forces were steadily advancing northward through the Solomon Islands chain, and each territorial gain necessitated absolute air superiority. Dick undertook multiple missions daily, frequently launching before the first glimmer of dawn and not returning to base until after nightfall. The operational tempo was relentlessly brutal. Pilots, exhausted to the point of collapse, would often doze off during vital briefings. Maintenance crews endured grueling 18-hour shifts, tirelessly working to ensure the P-38s remained airworthy. The Japanese, now fighting with desperate ferocity, hurled every available resource against the American forces, endeavoring to isolate Rabaul. Dick's kill count ascended steadily, 19 in July, 21 in August, and a remarkable 24 by September. Each numerical entry represented a specific engagement indelibly etched into his memory. The Zero that audaciously attempted to ram him over Wewak, the twin-engine bomber that detonated so proximate to his P-38 that its debris fractured his canopy, the intense skirmish over Oro Bay where he single-handedly downed 3 aircraft in a mere 4 minutes. Other aces were also accumulating impressive kill totals. Tommy Lynch had achieved 20, Gerald Johnson 18, and Neil Kirby was rapidly ascending with 15. The press, eager for a narrative, began to frame it as a race, a notion Dick deeply disdained. For him, this was not a competition, it was the stark reality of survival. Nevertheless, the Army Air Force enthusiastically embraced the burgeoning publicity, and headquarters meticulously maintained detailed scoreboards. Dick, consistently in the lead, became an invaluable asset for bolstering morale. In September 1943, he received orders to return to the United States for a war bond tour. He had endured nearly a year of continuous combat, having flown over 200 perilous missions. The respite should have been a welcome reprieve, but Dick harbored a profound sense of abandoning his squadron. General Kenny, however, assured him that the tour would be brief, a mere 2 months, after which he would return to New Guinea. The America of late 1943 scarcely resembled the nation he had departed. War production had fundamentally reshaped the economy. Women, a vital workforce, labored in factories constructing the very aircraft Dick flew. Rationing impacted every household, and an eager populace yearned to meet a genuine hero. Dick traversed 23 cities, delivering speeches he had painstakingly memorized, as he harbored a strong aversion to public speaking. He visited Lockheed's plant in Burbank, California, where workers assembling P-38s requested his autograph on fuselage panels before they were riveted into place. He journeyed home to Wisconsin, where his parents struggled to recognize the gaunt, malaria-afflicted young man who had returned in place of their robust farm boy son. He spent cherished time with Marge Vattendahl, his beloved girlfriend, and proposed marriage, stipulating it would occur when the war finally concluded. Her affirmative response proved to be the singular positive aspect of the entire arduous tour. In December of 1943, Dick, a celebrated combat pilot, made his eagerly anticipated return to the Southwest Pacific Theater, where he was formally integrated into the 49th Fighter Group's operations section. His designated responsibilities encompassed the intricate planning of aerial missions and the crucial task of mentoring burgeoning aviators. Yet, beyond these official duties, his personal imperative remained unchanged to persistently engage and neutralize enemy Japanese aircraft. During his absence, the venerable P-38 Lightning had undergone substantial enhancements. The newly introduced J model boasted more potent engines and superior characteristics for high-speed dives. Dick dedicated a rigorous week to requalifying on this advanced airframe, subsequently plunging back into the fray with the same meticulous and unyielding ferocity that defined his earlier tours. On January 7, 1944, his unwavering skill culminated in the downing of his 25th Zero, a victory secured over the skies of Wadham Island. A mere fortnight later, while providing vital escort for B-24 bombers en route to Rabaul, he achieved his 26th and 27th confirmed kills in a single, intense engagement. However, the tide of aerial combat was subtly shifting. The Japanese Imperial Air Force was adapting, albeit out of necessity. Their fresh cadre of pilots lacked the seasoned expertise of the 1942 veterans, most of whom had tragically perished in earlier campaigns. These replacements, while undeniably aggressive, were largely undertrained, often resorting to desperate, self-sacrificing attacks that, through sheer audacity and disregard for personal safety, occasionally proved effective. February brought with it 2 harrowing brushes with disaster for Dick. The first occurred when a grievously damaged Zero, in a final act of desperation, attempted a suicidal ramming maneuver, narrowly missing his aircraft by an agonizingly close margin of less than 10 feet. The second precarious incident unfolded during a mission over Wewak, where his port engine sustained critical hits from relentless ground fire, leading to a precipitous drop in oil pressure. With remarkable composure and an encyclopedic knowledge of his aircraft, he painstakingly coaxed the crippled P-38 back to base, a grueling 3-hour flight on a single engine that rigorously tested every facet of his mechanical understanding and piloting prowess. The Lightning, a testament to its robust design and his masterful handling, barely made it. The maintenance chief later informed him that the engine would have inevitably seized within another 15 minutes, underscoring the razor-thin margin of his survival. March heralded a renewed surge in his aerial triumphs, commencing with his 30th victory during a fierce dogfight above Taji, swiftly followed by his 31st and 32nd kills within the span of a single week. During this period, Dick began flying alongside a new wingman, Thomas J. Lynch, himself a distinguished ace, credited with 20 confirmed kills. Their combined efforts quickly forged a formidable partnership, grounded in mutual professional admiration and a highly synergistic blend of complementary combat attributes. Lynch possessed an inherent aggressiveness, often willing to press engagements that Dick, with his more cautious and analytical approach, might have opted to disengage from. Conversely, Dick meticulously calculated angles of attack and escape, providing a stable anchor, while Lynch masterfully disrupted enemy formations, creating opportune moments for their combined onslaught. Together, their coordinated tactics proved devastatingly effective. On April 3, 1944, this potent duo intercepted a substantial formation of Japanese aircraft actively threatening Allied shipping. In a display of exceptional airmanship, Dick personally accounted for 3 enemy planes, while Lynch added 2 more to their combined tally. These 5 victories, secured in a single mission, established an unprecedented new record for their squadron. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. By the middle of April, Dick had accumulated an astonishing 36 confirmed kills, yet he found himself profoundly exhausted in ways that simple rest could no longer remedy. He had endured an unrelenting 18 months of continuous combat, with only a fleeting return to the United States offering a brief, insufficient respite. His hands, even when not gripping the controls of his fighter, occasionally trembled uncontrollably, and his already slender frame had shed a significant 30 pounds. The flight surgeon, observing these alarming symptoms, strongly advocated for grounding him, citing clear indications of severe combat fatigue. Dick, however, steadfastly refused this recommendation. He was tantalizingly close to achieving a feat unparalleled by any American pilot in history. The esteemed top American ace of World War I, Eddie Rickenbacker, had concluded his career with 26 kills, a benchmark Dick had surpassed many months prior. Now his sights were firmly set on reaching the monumental figure of 40, a number that, though once seemingly unattainable, was now miraculously within his grasp. April 12, 1944, dawned much like any other morning in New Guinea, characterized by an oppressive, humid heat, the incessant hum of mosquitoes, and a mandatory mission briefing convened promptly at 5:30 hours. Intelligence reports indicated the presence of Japanese fighters operating in the vicinity of Hollandia, and the 49th Fighter Group was assigned the critical task of thoroughly clearing the airspace before the arrival of Allied bombers. During the briefing, Dick meticulously scrutinized the detailed maps, carefully noting the topographical features of the terrain, discerning the most probable approach vectors for enemy aircraft, and identifying potential emergency landing fields should unforeseen circumstances arise. Having flown countless missions over this particular area, he possessed an intimate familiarity with every mountain ridge and coastal inlet. His P-38 had undergone its customary pre-flight inspection and had been fully fueled, its formidable guns precisely bore-sighted the preceding night. Everything proceeded with a routine precision, save for one singular electrifying detail. Dick had accumulated 36 confirmed kills and now required just 4 more to achieve the legendary milestone of 40. The mission commenced punctually at 7:07 hours with a formation of 12 P-38 Lightnings, ascending purposefully into a sky dappled with broken cloud cover. Dick, leading the vanguard, meticulously scanned the heavens with that ingrained, practiced rhythm, a finely honed instinct that had unfailingly preserved his life through hundreds of hours of intense aerial combat. Upon reaching an altitude of 14,000 feet, they pierced through the fragmented clouds, emerging into an expanse of brilliant, clear air. It was then that they spotted them, a formidable formation of Japanese fighters and bombers, resolutely heading southwards towards Allied positions. Dick's experienced eyes quickly tallied at least 20 enemy aircraft, a massive strike package that unequivocally signified the Japanese command's commitment of substantial resources to this impending assault. He promptly broadcast the contact to his flight and expertly maneuvered his formation to initiate an attack from the sun, a time-honored tactical stratagem in aviation, and still, unequivocally, the most potent. The initial engagement, or bounce, was executed with textbook precision. Dick swiftly targeted a Zero positioned on the periphery of the enemy formation and initiated a steep, exhilarating dive, his airspeed rapidly surging past 400 miles per hour. The Lightning's controls, though stiffening under the immense aerodynamic pressures, responded faithfully to his expert inputs. He unleashed a torrent of fire at a distance of 350 yards, his incandescent tracers converging with deadly accuracy upon the Zero's fuselage. The enemy fighter instinctively rolled left, attempting a desperate split S maneuver to evade, but Dick had anticipated this exact response. He subtly adjusted his aim and fired another devastating burst. The Zero's canopy instantly disintegrated, and the aircraft, now a mortally wounded bird, tumbled uncontrollably, leaving a telltale plume of smoke in its wake. This marked his 37th confirmed kill. Dick executed a sharp, high G pull-up, the immense forces pressing him firmly into his seat, and immediately acquired another target, a twin-engine bomber desperately attempting to flee towards the distant coastline. He closed the distance to 300 yards and delivered a precise 3-second burst into the bomber's right engine. It erupted in a spectacular shower of shrapnel and flame. The crippled bomber nosed over decisively and plunged vertically towards the dense jungle canopy below. This was his 38th. The structured engagement rapidly devolved into a chaotic maelstrom of aerial combat, as both factions became inextricably intermingled in a swirling, desperate dogfight. Dick's vigilant wingman urgently called out the presence of Zeros at a higher altitude, prompting Dick to execute a violent reversal to confront them. 2 Japanese fighters were observed diving aggressively on a P-38 that was already trailing ominous wisps of smoke. Dick, with a decisive maneuver, cut them off, unleashing a perfectly timed deflection shot at the lead Zero. His stream of bullets walked with devastating precision across the fighter's wing route, causing the Zero to snap-roll violently into an uncontrolled spin. This was his 39th confirmed kill. Dick, however, could not afford the luxury of watching it plummet. The second Zero, exhibiting a remarkable level of pilot skill, had executed a rapid reversal and was now aggressively climbing directly towards him, its pilot clearly recognizing Dick as the preeminent threat in the swirling melee. They met in a harrowing, almost head-on pass, their combined closing speed exceeding an astonishing 600 miles per hour. Dick fired first, his guns blazing. Simultaneously, the Zero also opened fire. Tracers flashed perilously close past Dick's canopy, and he felt distinct impacts reverberate through his left wing. Yet, he maintained his relentless barrage. The Zero's engine violently erupted in flames, and the aircraft itself catastrophically disintegrated in midair. He had, against all odds, achieved his monumental 40th kill. In the immediate aftermath of his 40th victory, Dick's P-38 shuddered violently, and its left engine coughed ominously. The oil pressure gauge began to drop precipitously. He had undeniably sustained hits during that ferocious final exchange, though the full extent of the damage remained unclear. The engine temperature gauge climbed rapidly into the critical red zone. With practiced urgency, Dick swiftly shut down the ailing engine and feathered its propeller, then immediately altered his course towards his home base, a daunting 200 miles distant. The Lightning, despite its injury, handled predictably on a single engine, yet the fuel consumption rate increased dramatically, presenting a new, critical challenge. He meticulously performed the calculations in his head: remaining fuel, distance to base, and the accelerated consumption rate. The mental summation revealed a perilously tight margin. The remainder of his flight commendably formed up around him, providing a protective escort as they limped back across enemy territory. Then, 50 miles from base, the port engine seized completely, its propeller locking rigidly, despite being feathered. The resulting increase in drag forced Dick to advance the throttle on his sole remaining engine to maintain altitude. Fuel, already critical, now became acutely so. He made the difficult decision to instruct his flight to proceed ahead, recognizing the futility of everyone arriving on fumes. Dick flew the final 30 miles in stark solitude, his gaze fixed on the fuel gauge needle, which hovered precariously just above empty. He calmly contacted the tower at Port Moresby, declaring an emergency. They promptly cleared him for a straight-in approach. The P-38 crossed the field boundary with the fuel warning light glaring ominously. Dick touched down long, rolling out smoothly, and precisely as he turned off the runway, the starboard engine finally sputtered and quit. The P-38 Lightning, having completed its perilous mission, touched down with evidence of the intense aerial engagement it had just endured. A thorough inspection by the diligent ground crew revealed a staggering total of 17 bullet holes, riddling the aircraft's left wing and its engine nacelle, while another 3 were discovered in the right wing, with one particularly dangerous round having penetrated close to, if not directly into, the fuel tank. As the pilot, Dick disembarked from the damaged but functional cockpit. General Kenny himself was present at the operations building, awaiting his return. The reason for such a high-ranking officer's presence was clear. Dick had just secured his 40th confirmed aerial victory, a monumental achievement that established a new American record for fighter pilots. Without delay, General Kenny personally affixed the Distinguished Service Cross to Dick as flight suit. Right there on the tarmac, a prestigious honor, though the weary pilot might have privately preferred the simple comforts of a refreshing shower and a substantial meal. The eager press, ever vigilant for a compelling narrative, swiftly crafted their headlines, proclaiming, "Farm boy from Wisconsin becomes America's ace of aces." Yet, for Dick, the immediate concern was practical. He simply wished to ascertain the timeline for his P-38's repairs, understanding that another mission loomed on the horizon. While the record proudly stood at 40 on that historic day, April 12, 1944, Dick would indeed continue to augment his impressive tally in the ensuing months, flying additional sorties. Nevertheless, Command increasingly sought to safeguard their preeminent ace, preferring to mitigate the daily risks he faced. Each subsequent kill merely burnished his already legendary status, but it was the momentous figure of 40 that indelibly etched his name into the annals of aviation history. Richard Bong's unparalleled distinction as an ace was not, in essence, attributable to some inherent extraordinary talent or preternatural reflexes that set him physically apart. Indeed, the ranks of wartime pilots were filled with individuals who possessed superior eyesight, swifter reaction times, or even more overtly aggressive combat personalities. What truly differentiated Dick from his contemporaries was an unwavering discipline, meticulously honed and refined to an exquisite art form. He approached the perilous ballet of aerial combat with the same methodical patience and meticulous attention to detail that had characterized his formative years on a Wisconsin farm, observing nuances that often escaped the notice of others. While many hotshot pilots relied heavily on raw instinct and overt aggression, often engaging in spontaneous maneuvers, Dick conversely meticulously studied complex ballistics tables and precisely calculated optimal firing ranges. Where others might indiscriminately spray ammunition across the sky in the hopeful pursuit of a hit, Dick executed controlled, economical bursts of fire, delivered with surgical precision at the exact, most opportune moment. His kill-per-sortie ratio was nothing short of extraordinary, a testament not to an inflated number of missions flown, but rather to his singular ability to ensure that each and every combat engagement yielded a decisive and impactful result. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The P-38 Lightning, an aircraft that initially grappled with a somewhat tarnished reputation, ultimately proved its formidable capabilities in Dick's exceptionally skilled hands. Early critics often asserted that the twin-boomed fighter was inherently incapable of dogfighting effectively, that it lacked the maneuverability to turn competitively with nimble enemy fighters, and that its intricate design rendered it overly complex for the brutal realities of combat conditions. Dick, however, systematically dismantled these criticisms by steadfastly refusing to engage the enemy on their preferred terms. Instead, he ingeniously exploited the Lightning's inherent strengths, its blistering speed, its overwhelming firepower, and its superior altitude performance, while assiduously avoiding scenarios that would expose its inherent weaknesses. When fellow P-38 pilots voiced their frustrations and complaints about the aircraft's perceived limitations, Dick would invariably pose a single, probing question. "Are you trying to turn with zeros?" If the answer affirmed their misguided tactics, he would patiently but firmly elucidate the folly of such an approach. "The Lightning was not a zero," he would explain. "Stop trying to force it to be one. Utilize it as it was designed, and it will unfailingly bring you home." This pragmatic and highly effective philosophy rapidly propagated throughout the 5th Air Force, transforming tactical dogma. Consequently, P-38 units universally adopted boom and zoom tactics as their standard operating procedure, leading to a dramatic and undeniable improvement in their kill ratios across the theater. Dick's highly effective gunnery techniques swiftly ascended to the status of mandatory study material for all fighter pilots operating across the sprawling Pacific theater. The Army Air Force meticulously analyzed his gun camera footage, discerning and documenting distinct patterns in his combat methodology. It was observed that he consistently fired significantly shorter bursts than the average pilot, clocking in at an economical 1.3 seconds, starkly contrasting with the 2.8-second average of his peers. Furthermore, he demonstrated an unwavering patience, withholding fire until his target was precisely within the optimal range of 250 to 350 yards, thereby steadfastly refusing to squander precious ammunition on low-probability, long-range shots. His targeting philosophy was equally precise. Rather than merely saturating an entire enemy aircraft with bullets, he aimed for specific, critical components, such as engines, cockpits, or fuel tanks. Most crucially, his understanding and execution of deflection shooting surpassed that of virtually every other pilot in the theater. This remarkable ability to accurately lead a crossing target, predicting its future position, was a skill directly cultivated from his years spent hunting ducks in the marshlands of Wisconsin, seamlessly translated into the complex three-dimensional geometry of aerial combat. While the Air Force diligently attempted to systematize his techniques into formal training curricula, the results were, perhaps predictably, mixed. The mechanical aspects could indeed be taught, but the instinctive timing and spatial awareness, so crucial to his success, largely stemmed from an accumulation of invaluable experience. His profound partnership with his dedicated crew chief, John Doherty, illuminated another critical, yet often overlooked component of his extraordinary success: the indispensable relationship between a fighter pilot and their maintenance personnel. Dick treated his ground crew with a level of respect and genuine appreciation that was remarkably uncommon for officer-enlisted dynamics during the rigid military hierarchy of 1944. He consistently listened attentively when they articulated mechanical issues, valuing their expertise. He placed implicit trust in their professional judgment regarding the aircraft, capabilities, and limitations. In turn, this mutual respect fostered an environment where they maintained his P-38 in a state of operational excellence, superior to any other aircraft within the squadron. Consequently, when other planes were grounded for essential maintenance, Dick's Lightning was almost invariably mission-ready. This exceptional reliability directly translated into more combat hours logged, more opportunities for engagement, and ultimately, a higher tally of kills. The overarching lesson was clear: true success in aerial combat transcended what transpired solely in the skies. It was deeply rooted in the meticulous logistics, diligent maintenance, unwavering trust, and robust interpersonal relationships cultivated on the ground. The official final tally of Richard Bong's aerial victories stood definitively at 40 confirmed kills, a figure sometimes accompanied by an asterisk in historical discussions. Some historians, relying on analyses of gun camera footage that partially supported additional claims, contend that Dick's total should rightfully be considered closer to 48, encompassing probable kills and damaged aircraft. However, Dick himself never advocated for inflated numbers or embellished his record. He possessed a profound understanding that combat records demanded stringent standards, and that exaggerated claims inevitably undermined credibility within the military and historical communities. The 40 confirmed kills were the numbers that truly mattered to him because each one was witnessed, meticulously documented, and rigorously verified. This unwavering discipline, his resolute refusal to claim any victory that could not be unequivocally proven, was a profound reflection of his intrinsic character. He could have, like some other aces of the era, easily claimed every damaged aircraft as a kill to boost his personal score. Instead, he held himself to an exceptionally higher standard, a testament to his integrity and professionalism. Following the cessation of hostilities, Dick was honorably assigned to crucial test pilot duties, tasked with evaluating the next generation of jet aircraft at the bustling facilities in Burbank, California. On August 6, 1945, a date indelibly marked by the dropping of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Dick married his beloved Marge Vatndal. Tragically, their time together as husband and wife would be painfully brief, lasting only 4 months. On December 6, 1945, precisely 4 months to the day after his wedding, Dick was conducting an acceptance flight of a cutting-edge P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter. During the critical phase of takeoff, both of the aircraft's fuel pumps catastrophically failed. The jet subsequently crashed into an open field situated north of Burbank, claiming the life of the legendary pilot. Richard Bong was merely 24 years old. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, who had miraculously navigated and survived over 200 harrowing combat missions, who had bravely confronted and bested hundreds of formidable enemy aircraft in the crucible of war, ultimately met his untimely demise, not in the fury of battle, but in a seemingly routine test flight due to a mundane mechanical failure. The profound irony of this tragic end was certainly not lost on anyone who had the privilege of knowing him. Dick himself had often articulated a prescient wisdom, repeatedly stating that mechanical problems, if not approached with the utmost respect and vigilance, posed a far greater danger than even the most determined enemy fighters. Richard Bong's enduring legacy extended far beyond the impressive numerical tally of his aerial victories. The innovative tactics he pioneered and perfected became foundational doctrine, shaping the very fabric of fighter combat for subsequent generations. Concepts such as energy management, the devastatingly effective boom and zoom attack, disciplined gunnery, and meticulous wingman coordination were all either developed or significantly refined by his combat experience. The P-38 Lightning, initially viewed with skepticism, ultimately garnered widespread acceptance and respect, partly because Dick so unequivocally demonstrated its immense capabilities when wielded by the right pilot. Moreover, the profound example he set, a model of professionalism devoid of ego, competence unburdened by arrogance, and lethality tempered by a complete absence of cruelty, became the quintessential template for what a truly exemplary fighter pilot should aspire to be. Even 70 years after his tragic death, contemporary fighter pilots continue to meticulously study Richard Bong's combat techniques, recognizing their timeless relevance. The quiet farm boy from Wisconsin never actively sought fame, nor did he chase glory. He simply desired to execute his duties with utmost proficiency. In doing so, he inadvertently became the benchmark against which all others in his field are measured. 40 enemy aircraft destroyed. 200 perilous missions survived. He was one extraordinary pilot who definitively proved that unwavering discipline, profound patience, and surgical precision would, in the long run, invariably triumph over raw, untamed aggression. That, in essence, was Richard Bong's war, and that was his enduring victory.